This week on Healthy Living, the International AIDS Conference in Germany highlights advancements in the fight against HIV/AIDS. The Central African Republic intensifies efforts to reduce the incidence of HIV. And an HIV-positive advocate, Josephine Nabukenya, shares her efforts to combat stigma in Uganda. These stories and more in this edition of Healthy Living. Hello, I'm Linor Moudou. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Healthy Living. The International AIDS Conference has ended in Germany, highlighting advancements and remaining challenges in the fight against HIV/AIDS. Among other things, scientists have disclosed a seventh HIV case, dubbed the next Berlin patient, who appears to be free of the virus after long-term treatment and stem cell transplants. UNAIDS's latest report reveals that AIDS-related deaths have been cut by 69%. However, about 1.3 million people were newly infected with HIV in 2023, with a significant portion occurring in Africa. We start in the Central African Republic, where efforts are underway to curb the incidence of the viral disease.
The 2024 UNAIDS Global Report launched at this year's
percent increase in getting people treatment in the last 9 years. But the world is not on track to end AIDS by 2030. A person dies from HIV-related illness every minute. It's still a crisis. One is to resource the response. The HIV response globally is short of $9.5 billion. This gap keeps increasing.
UNAIDS reports that nearly half of the new HIV infections in 2023 were in Eastern and Southern Africa, with another 15% in Western and Central Africa. That year, 120,000 children in this age group became infected and 76,000 died from AIDS-related causes. Efforts are underway in the Central African Republic to raise awareness.
I am an orphan. I was the only one of 3 siblings to take treatment every day, and I took the treatment without stopping. I lived with the HIV virus since I was born. More than once, I tried to put an end to my life and commit suicide by taking pills.
Observers say the challenges in the Central African Republic are compounded by war and poverty. Gender inequality further exacerbates the vulnerability to HIV.
Gender inequality and gender-based violence have left women in Central African Republic more vulnerable to HIV.
Support centers like CISJEU play a critical role in prevention and education.
CISJEU is a youth-friendly center offering multiple services like prevention and awareness and treatment as needed by the community and for the community. We have also recruited and have trained 160 peer educators, 80 in schools and the other 80 in the youth centers.
For the first time in the history of the global HIV and AIDS epidemic, Sub-Saharan Africa has seen the greatest decline in new HIV infections. While significant progress has been made in the fight against HIV and AIDS, the latest UNAIDS report underscores the urgent need for increased funding and equitable access to treatment.
Peter Shibatamoto is project coordinator for Humana People to People in Botswana. He discusses how community action can achieve improved health outcomes for HIV patients.
I think currently Africa, specifically Sub-Saharan Africa, and more so Eastern and Southern Africa, we are doing well, and most of the countries are moving towards the epidemic control. And as you recall, the first 5 countries to reach 95, 95, 95, which are the targets set by UNAIDS by 2030, 5 countries in this region, they've actually reached the targets. And by the way, 20.5 million people living with HIV on the continent, About 90% of them are on treatment. When you look at the prevalence, for instance, 15% prevalence in HIV is among the men, and the 26, which is almost double, is among the women. And one might ask, why is it like that? I think it boils down to the issues of gender. In Botswana, gender-based violence is still quite prevalent. And as a government, they've recognized that something has to be done. Then the other thing which causes this, it's the issue of multiple sexual partners. And the affected group within Botswana is basically the 15 to 24-year-old girls and women, young women. And these are the young women who are going out with the elder men 40 and above. So you can imagine these have been exposed to HIV and they don't get tested, and they are powerful in terms of resources. So what it needs now for us is to ensure that as we engage the communities, we have to educate our traditional leaders, the faith leaders, the heads of schools, the heads of all the community structures, so that they understand exactly what it takes for us to be in this response. Umana People to People is an NGO which is people-centered. We believe that it is the people who know their challenges. We believe that it is people who have the answer to the problems which affect them. So what we basically do as Umana People to People is to ensure that we equip the community with the skills, with the knowledge, so that they're able to understand and take a decision on their own.
Now, according to you, how often should someone get tested for HIV, and what actions do you think should be taken to better support people living with the virus and fight stigma? Here are some reactions from Cameroon.
I think after every 3 months, just to be sure now, just to be sure that we are free from it. Because you will never know, you can never tell from somebody's face whether he or she has it or not.
I think for a normal citizen, he or she needs to do a test of HIV at least like 3 times a year.
As for me, HIV is a disease that have been long introduced. Like individuals that are being infected with HIV, I would like to say that they can take their test at least twice a month, because you might not know where you'll be infected.
All the time tests you can do like twice a year. You can do twice a year because it depends on your interaction. If you don't interact with so many women, you can do even once a year. But twice a year or thrice a year is necessary for everybody.
I think there are many methods that can help to prevent HIV/AIDS. I will just say that the best one is abstinence. So to prevent from having sex, but there are other means that we can say the use of condoms for people that are already sexually active. And also, when we go to barber shop, we should be sure that they disinfect all the tools they are using before using for ourselves.
I think there are many people with HIV outside there, but they don't feel loved. Like they're afraid that if they come out, maybe they'll reject them or they'll throw them away because they have sickness.
They have to be supported financially. They have to be taken care of. We have to bring them to us, because before we used to think that they should be thrown away. Nowadays, we know that people can live with AIDS, provided they take their medicines and so on.
Josephine Nabukenya is a global ambassador for the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation, EGPAF. As a community advocate living with HIV, Josephine works daily to fight stigma and discrimination across her home country of Uganda and has testified in front of the U.S. Congress. She shares her story with VOA's Nkamiti Juma Williams.
Before I found out my status, I was already going to the clinic on a monthly basis with my mother. So I knew about the clinic flow, although by then I hadn't known about my status. When my mother was very sick, she had only one CD4 count, like she was bedridden. As a child at home, I had to do housework. So I was taking care of her bedroom, and she thought she was going to die by then. So she had written a will, but at that age I didn't know it was a will. For me, I thought it was a letter. So I read this letter and it was disclosing our HIV status, myself and my mother. Definitely there are realities of living with HIV. And some of those realities include the challenges associated with HIV virus. And that is the stigma itself. Sometimes it's other times it's just external coming in from different people. So I started the advocacy journey when I was very young. So when I shared my story before Congress in 2005, it was a big issue way back home. So I went back home and it was all over the news and everyone read about the story. So that was like public disclosure for me, like everyone knew. But still, I quickly went through those challenges, including that kind of stigma from different people knowing about my status and probably, distancing themselves from associating with me, all my family. I quickly handled that because I was already in a support group where I knew that I was not alone. There were other children that, were living with HIV. And we had this family support group where we felt loved. Right from my family, I was loved and supported, but also at the health facility, we were loved and supported. So that kind of love and family support that I did get from the facility and home kept me moving through the challenges of stigma. Of course, when I was growing up at a tender age, in my adolescent stage, of course, there were many myths and misconceptions, like probably someone that has HIV will not live up to maybe 30 years or 40 years. And those are being demystified. Like right now, currently, we have people living with HIV that are up to like 33 years old or even 35 years old. So that has been demystified. My mother currently takes fewer tablets. She's among the people that took ARVs when there were very many, I think like around 10 tablets. Right now, she's taking, I think, like 2. She appreciates that science more than anyone else because she knows the time she went through and she was taking many tablets. I appreciate the tablet now because I know what I went through when I was taking the syrup. But we are now in an era of test and treat. Someone is HIV positive, they've not fallen sick, you've tested them, and then they're starting ARVs, you're 1 tablet a day. They don't know the past. So to them, that is still a very big challenge. Although for us that know the history and probably have tested some of all that journey that I've talked about, we do of course appreciate the science more than probably someone else that has not fallen sick and they're just taking this tablet for the very first time. So to all people living with HIV out there, just be open to love. And when this right person comes to you, just be ready to disclose and be ready with the information you need to go through the process of disclosure.
That's our show for today. For more health news, wellness tips, and medical breakthroughs, stay connected to Voice of America at voaafrica.com. You can follow me on X at Linoch Mudu. Until next time, stay well and strive to make every day a healthy day.